Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regeter, and today I'm joined by clinical psychologist and the author of When Panic Happens, Short-Circuit Anxiety and Fear in the Moment, Dr. Charles Schaeffer. In this episode, Dr. Schaeffer shares coping skills to quickly decrease the intensity of panic symptoms and rewire your nervous system to prevent future attacks. Welcome back. We recorded more than a year ago.
We did.
Since then, you have published a new book that's been my survival guide. I am super excited to talk about it today. But before we jump in, I want to check in. How are you really?
I'm a little sad. The world's in a really hard spot since a year ago. And it'd be nice if things were a little more calm with our leaders out there, I think. That would be nice.
Yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot happening, and it's so hard to, I think, manage a lot of the information that's happening. And I've
Right.
noticed for myself, there's a lot more anxiety and this pressure of I want to be helpful and I want to do stuff, but everything is really out of my control. The best I can do is make a donation at this point.
Right.
And that feels a lot. Right now, I've noticed today I'm having a lot more anxiety. There's the Hurricane Helene just hit as of when we're recording, and Milton is about to hit in almost the exact same spot. It's at a category 5. It's where my brother lives.
Oh my
So getting on
goodness.
the phone with him, making sure he is driving back to the East Coast to make sure he's safe has kind of been a lot. So there's so much happening in the world in so many different directions.
Yes.
And learning how to kind of exist in the midst of it and still be able to show up as you need without letting that anxiety and fear kind of cripple you has been really difficult. And that's one of the reasons I've really enjoyed your book. It's been helping me kind of navigate things I can do based on how I'm feeling because anxiety sounds like you would use the same thing every time, but different
Right.
forms of anxiety and different symptoms coming up and what's causing it, different exercises actually help.
Yeah, you press different parts of your brain. It does interesting things, but people don't always know how to do that. So the book's really a way to help more people learn how to use their software, how to use what they got.
Yes, and it takes a lot of the like scientific terms and it breaks them down so I can actually understand them. And one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite things is your example of the vagus nerve is like a highway and
Yep.
how it brings you through. Can you tell us a little bit more about that highway?
Sure. It's like, so about 80% of your unconscious sensations. So everything you feel inside of yourself when you feel a little nervous before talking an event, or when you feel a little sleepy, like you could go to bed, that all travels down the same kind of one lane highway, if you will. And when it goes down, it interacts with every single one of your organs. And so there's these different spots, if you will, where the highway kind of intersects with a side road, if you want to keep the highway metaphor going. And panic's really annoying because it's a crash that kind of happens in some spot on the highway and it just carries down. So if there's a crash in the middle of a highway and there's only one or two lanes, what's going to happen with traffic?
It's gonna slow down, stop.
Yeah, you're going to get stuck there. And that's exactly what happens. It gets stuck, this signal. And it can feel like different things to different people because it gets stuck in different places for different people. For some folks, it gets stuck right here in their chest. So they feel this heaviness, this intense kind of heavy in their chest, whether it's breathing feels like it's really hard to do, or it feels like your heart's really beating out of your chest, like there's an intense stress going on, like you're running a marathon. For other people, it's this big nausea that comes about as it's pressing on your stomach and your intestines, but it's the same highway. And it's crazy because it runs back and forth. So there's a lot of things you can do at the top of the highway that can clear out and call in like the highway crew to clear out the accident. A lot of folks they don't know how that works. So the book kind of teaches them how to do that.
It does, and it touches on all those different sensations people might feel. So
Right.
for me, for example, I get to experience anxiety in different ways depending on the situation, and I didn't
Right.
realize that. So I thought the only time I was really experiencing some form of panic or anxiety was when my heart would race really, really fast, and I felt like I couldn't catch my breath and my palms were
Mm-hmm.
really sweaty. And I've learned that that's more than a performance anxiety issue. So that's when I have a test or an exam, something that I could fail. I have those physical sensations. But on more of a day to day, I have
like right now I'm experiencing some anxiety and it's a tightness in my chest. It
Mhm.
feels like my heart is being squeezed and
Right.
my breathing's a lot slower. It hurts a little more to breathe. It's a very different sensation and there's different things I can do based on the sensation that I'm feeling to navigate it, and it's not me having a heart attack or convincing myself that I'm having a heart
Yeah,
attack.
it sounds a lot better when it's not having a heart attack. And that's really what a lot of folks thinks happen. I mean, I when I get panic, it's like this tingling on the back of my head and it travels down through and then goes into my chest. But I can feel it start to happening really in a way that's pretty private. I guess that's a big myth that people think it's like in the movies, it's this big spinning, oh my God moment. People are having this almost vertigo looking thing happening. But for most people, panic's a pretty private, intimate experience that happens way more often if you're paying attention to your body. But there's just so many things happening that people can miss that.
You did talk about that in the book too. How
Right.
a lot of times we think that every single person is going to see what's happening. And that brings more, at least in my experience, more fear and shame into it.
Mhm.
And thinking that I need to just stop acting this way and I need to kind of grow up and mature and something's wrong with me. And it just brought in a lot of this internal stigma and realizing that a lot of it, other people don't necessarily see the physical symptoms, but all the internal symptoms no one is seeing. So there are things I can do internally. I mean, cognitive restructuring was a great thing that you can do written in this book. Being able to identify the different thoughts that you're having and how you can make them more helpful.
Yep.
Another thing that you included was the water tank visualization. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of things you could also do internally as it's happening to regulate it. So it's not everything has to be external where everyone can see what's happening and everyone can see what you're doing to get through it.
Right. I think that's the hiding it. It's a real big reason I wanted to write this book was to normalize the conversation, if you will.
Love that.
So I really wanted to make it a normal topic that people could approach because panic is super normal. We live in a pretty chaotic place with a lot of different things happening in the environment. One of the major glitches that can happen in our operating system, if you will, is panic. And so if you know it's going to happen and you can understand what's happening, you don't have to freak out. You don't have to feel weird because it's so common. Millions of Americans are going to have a panic attack and only a fraction of them are going to go seek help. And I'd rather more folks get some sort of help than just try to white knuckle through it or tough it out, or a lot of the strong messages that we get, certainly in the United States, for what you should do with some emotional stuff that's happening. But I also don't think people should have to sit with it without being able to shut it down or stop it from happening. And it's great that I discovered all these different ways that people could do that.
It is really great because we do tend to self isolate in it. And without conversations like this, without kind of, I'm going to keep calling it my survival guide, but without conversations like this, without guides, a lot of people don't even know what's happening. Like I mentioned with me, feeling like I'm having a heart attack. A lot of
Right.
times we then think it's something different. And when our medical doctors are telling us, no, you're not having a heart attack, then it's like, okay, what's wrong with me? I'm making this up. It's all in my head. And
Mm,
in a sense, it's in your head, but it's your brain reacting and it's something that you can do. It's not something that you're making up.
right. It's amazing how much we've discovered about the brain mind body connection in the last decade. And a lot of the things in this book come out of that research and the realization that it's a two-way street. What's happening outside on your body is going back into your brain and coming back out. So we got to address it on both fronts. It's definitely what
Absolutely.
you can do here. Yeah.
That mind body connection is so powerful. And it's not something that I feel is talked about enough. At
Mm,
least I didn't see those kinds of conversations until more recently and until doing this podcast, actually, and realizing that what's happening in my brain can impact my physical symptoms and how I'm feeling. And it's not, I keep coming back to this idea that because everyone for so long told me it's in my head, I'm making it up, I'm
mm,
being dramatic, I'm looking for attention. And to understand the mind body connection and understand that what I'm feeling and experiencing physically is just as real as what I'm experiencing and feeling mentally. And there's things I can do by helping one can help the other. They
right.
coexist.
We have this weird cultural thing in the West writ large that we have to separate like our thinking and our mind from the rest of our body and everything else that happens. But that's a cultural belief. There's not a lot of science that would support that that's true. In fact, the other way around, we have a lot of science that supports your body is a big inroad into your mind, and a lot of things you do for your body that you don't even think of all the time, like exercise, are fantastic for your mind and makes things so much easier to do. But without the realization of how much your body impacts things like your temperature in your body, how it can impact your heart rate, people really get stuck in these loops full of adrenaline. And it can really feel like you're going crazy. It can feel like you're going to die. It really sucks to have this kind of adrenaline pumping through your heart at a rate that most people aren't going to get unless they run a marathon. Yeah.
Another exercise you included in here was the aerobics and the importance of kind of moving your body. And when I first read it, I was like, okay, I go for walks all the time. I try to work out and I still experience it. So what's happening? And as I started practicing, one of the exercises was the stairs and kind of just find 15 minutes of uninterrupted time where you can just go up and down the stairs and initiate sweat. And that made a big difference versus going for a walk, not breaking a sweat, versus finding ways to just, I don't know. I feel like as soon as I started breaking a sweat, I started calming down. My body, just temperature inside really changed.
Right. And what's happening when you break a sweat is there's a part of your polyvagal system, part of that highway, that has a stop point on it, like a brake for a bicycle. And it can keep spinning, 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 especially out of control when you're anxious, and send all sorts of signals. But when you start pushing on this, what's called a cardiac vagal brake, it actually shows that it reduces your heart rate, and it's really great for heart health overall. So there's a big link between cardiovascular health and anxiety here, if we look at it with aerobic activity, because when you break a sweat, you're doing enough that your body has to swing into releasing all these different things that heal you, that slow down your heart rate. And to do that, it has to press on that brake. And the more you do it, what do you think happens to the strength of that brake?
It gets stronger.
Right. So the more you practice consistently sweating, and it doesn't have to be for a long time. I say 15 minutes because that's a long time for a lot of folks. You can take it as you can, frankly. Whenever you start to break any amount of sweat, that's when you know, okay, this is sufficient. If I'm breathing heavy, if I'm sweating, I'm engaging that brake, everything's going to start to feel a little colder. You might even feel these tinglies up and down your spine or the back of your head when you're noticing you're getting a little bit of adrenaline to keep going. That's a really good signal that things are getting released internally. They're going to calm you down, not just now, but in the future. It's really amazing how much that stuff can build.
It is so amazing. And I think hearing about it and practicing it is so different. And that's why with this book, I made a point to try a bunch of the different exercises because it sounds so kind of easy and silly in theory, right? Like, how is breaking a sweat or doing a word search, right, gonna help me? How is taking a cold shower really gonna help me? And then when you actually try these exercises, it does make a big difference. So I kind of wanted to go through some of the exercises in the
Sure.
book that are my favorite that I've used and have you
Absolutely.
explain a bit more of why they work so people can kind of get another understanding of it.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the Calm Anchor playlist.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I tried this playlist for the first time when I was experiencing a lot of anxiety toward missing my family because I've been away for so long. And all of a sudden, I really just wanted a hug from them and I couldn't catch my breath. So I made the Calm Anchor playlist and it really helped me. So, can you tell me a bit more about the science behind it?
Sure. So what's interesting about our brain is it's not as sophisticated. The places that respond to anxiety or panic, they're not as sophisticated as the other parts that we use a lot, like me and you talking right now, you just listening to my words and being able to understand them. That's very new software in the package. That stuff doesn't run as nicely or smoothly on the same database, if you will, the same RAM, as the older stuff that we share with a lot of other animals. And can you guess what music and hearing is? Not words, just sound itself. Do you think that's a human thing or that might be an animal thing?
I guess that is an animal thing. We all
Right.
hear.
What's really crazy is the playlist that you're thinking of here. People are making this to calm cattle right now and livestock. They're using the exact same science to calm down entire rooms full of animals so they don't freak out when bad stuff like hurricanes are happening, for example, in the background, and you don't want them to freak out. And so this is a really deep in our brain thing that we share with a lot of other mammals, right? And so what this means is that you can push on different parts of your vagus nerve on using sound effectively. And what's really interesting is what's going to be a calm playlist for one person might not be for another person. A lot of people, it's personal. What feels calm to them usually is associated with a lot of calm memories. Now, I don't know what came up for you when you made your playlist.
Okay, so I have to say the most heartbreaking part was realizing that Taylor Swift did not necessarily calm me down versus either brought a lot of lower emotions and angry emotions or really happy, excited emotions, and there wasn't that balance. So that was the hardest thing in the world.
I think we
But
should ask Taylor to make a calming album. I think it's if anybody can do it, it's Taylor.
Taylor, I need you to calm me down.
Yes.
So, but I learned that songs that I have as memories singing with my mom really helped me. So, for example, this one's For the Girls by Martina McBride.
Mm-hmm.
I can just closing my eyes, listening to the song. And it may be because this form of anxiety I really practice when I'm missing my family, but brings me back to that sense of calm and joy of just being together with my mom and having something that we do together. So that was really interesting to me because I have not listened to that song in years. And then all of a
Right.
sudden, that was what made me be able to catch my breath again.
For me, I have a lot of Bob Marley and the Wailers because it's a big part of what I swim to. And when I'm swimming, my heart rate is really controlled and my breathing is really deep because otherwise I wouldn't be able to make it swimming. And so what happens when I put that playlist on when I'm not swimming is it kind of switches me into the same mode. So what's really cool is you can kind of hack stuff you're already using, especially if you're doing something like swimming as a sport, for example, or a workout. Because often that music will not be as intense, at least not for everybody. It's going to try to keep you in a groove, so to speak. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, now I'm gonna try so I have a playlist I put on before I speak
Mm-hmm.
to kind of just, I don't know if it's to calm my nerves or to make me feel like I belong. It's something, but now I'm gonna listen to it after this and pay more attention to how it impacts me because I never thought of music and how it can really impact how I'm feeling.
We have millions of these little receptors in our ears, these little hairs, and we share them with all these other animals, and they go right into your brain. They go right into the sensory sections of your brain. So it's really amazing how disconnected we can get, keeping everything up here and like the thinky part that we humans like to do a lot, thinking and talking, and really miss out on all the other stuff we share with the rest of our animal kingdom, our animal family that can really help us calm down.
Thinking and talking. I'd love to do that so much, especially the talking part. Thinking
Oh man, yeah. Well,
is my thing.
the thinking and the talking, they don't always go together. People tend to have that problem. That's
Yeah,
the thing that comes up. Again, it's the
talk
newer
makes me
stuff.
think.
It's the newer stuff. The older stuff is make sure your heart rate slows down if you're freezing. There's just so many things that are built in that if we understood how we respond to temperature or sound, it would make people's lives a lot less dependent on other things. And that's the other reason that I wanted to write this kind of book is because too many folks I met along the way got hooked on like short-term panic medications that were either overprescribed or they sought them out not from official means, and it just is horrible when people have all this rebound anxiety and they are really afraid that without a Xanax or without some sort of daily thing, they're gonna fall apart. And I'd love people to have other tools so they don't feel as dependent. So medication can be a part of their treatment plan and not the only part. You know what I mean?
Yes, that's so important. I'm a big advocate for medication when it's needed. For example, I take a
Right,
mood stabilizer every day for bipolar 2. Very
right,
helpful. When I've
right.
tried anxiety medications, for the ones I've tried, I've always had a side effect.
Mm,
Some of them is just becoming very physically sick. One of them was really bad eye twitching.
that
And I
sucks.
was like, okay, it really did suck. It was driving everyone around me, making them very like stressed about
I
it.
can't imagine it wouldn't
Um,
make you stressed.
I didn't know what was happening as much. So
Okay.
everyone else was like, "You eyes won't stop twitching. What is wrong?" Um, so I genuinely thought, okay, there's nothing I can do.
Mm-hmm.
That it's either deal with these side effects, and I would only notice it when my face would start to get stuck for a little bit from it. So it was either deal with these side effects or have anxiety. And there was
Right.
like nothing in between. And then when we recorded originally the first time, we did the ice cube squeeze. And I started using that. And then I started taking like cold showers. And that started to help a bit with the anxiety. And I realized I
Yep.
had a little bit more control than just medication or feeling stuck.
Yep. There's so many in betweens. I'd love people to feel empowered, and I'd love them to feel empowered without having to go to like all these years of school. The way I learned all this stuff, I feel like this should be something that other people should benefit from, which is why I wanted the book to be out there and easy for everybody to use and apply. I want it to be fun, so I use all the video game analogies because that's what people are familiar with. And so I hope it helps a lot of folks. I hope a lot of folks can find things like you're finding to help them understand they don't have to feel so helpless when they're experiencing panic, that they can feel and get in touch with their inner superhero, right, and rescue themselves.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We tend to feel so hopeless and helpless in it.
Yeah.
And we think that there's nothing we can do. First of all, when we don't have the awareness, when I didn't have the awareness of it, I felt just completely overwhelmed and I believed that it was all in my head and something was wrong
Mm,
with me. And then when I finally got the awareness but didn't know what to do, I felt hopeless, stuck. So now getting to a point where learning the tools has been so helpful and having, I really love the idea of a survival guide. Having a survival guide, something that can give you actual tools that you can use in a way that makes sense. Because for
right.
a while, it was all these books with big words. And let me tell you, my textbooks, a lot of times I'm like, I'll copy passages and put them in ChatGPT and like translate it so that I understand the words are.
It's a problem. There's too much academic dense writing. We don't make it so most folks can understand it. And that's one of the things I learned working at the VA and working at public hospitals. And so I tried to bring it into the book.
And you did an amazing job. But moving on to exercise two,
Yeah.
let's do the game out.
Right.
So the game out, you talk about how you can use these kind of brain games when you're feeling really anxious because your brain can only focus on one.
Right. So remember how I told you the talkie part is kind of new? So the visual stuff, like the hearing stuff, is not new. Our visual lobe, so to speak, the part of our brain that does visual processing, is pretty sophisticated. Our eyes are kind of some of the biggest in the animal kingdom. And we use a lot of information and attention when we're just doing anything with our eyes. But if we start to rotate things in space inside of our head, like we have to draw an image in our head and try to rotate it like a block, like a Tetris block, if you will, it makes it really hard to do any other processes in our brain because it eats up a lot of the juice. And so if you're noticing you're really talking at yourself a lot, like, oh my God, what's happening? Am I dying? What the hell? Get yourself under control. What's going on? I don't know if this sounds familiar.
Yep, me.
But right, but this is often the inner narrative that's happening for somebody that's struggling with a panic attack at a time they don't want to have it, right? Experiencing panic. A lot of that can get shorted out, can get stopped, like an app that will short out if you lose a little bit of your processing speed or your data signal. If you open an app that's a little bit more important for functioning, and rotating objects and seeing things in space is far more important than talking for human survival, believe it or not. And so if you rotate objects like that, it'll force you to focus on that. And not only will it force you to focus on that, by doing that, it'll turn off the part of your brain that talks. And so you can try to talk to yourself when you're playing Tetris and see what happens. I don't know if you've tried, or Candy Crush. You ever tried that before?
I haven't, but I have been doing the word searches.
And what do word searches tell you? What do they tell you about the ability to rotate things in space when you're looking for words? What happens?
All I'm focused on is those words in front of
Uh-huh.
me. And that's all I hear in my head. And that has been so huge because I'm in my head a lot. I am very mean to myself, very critical.
I
And
don't
that
think
keeps
anybody
me
can
up at
relate
night.
to that who listens to this podcast at
No
all.
one gets it.
I
No.
definitely can't. No, I've never had those thoughts. Go ahead.
And it would keep me up at night. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sleeping an average of 2 to 3 hours and
Right.
doing the word search before bed, forcing my mind to not think about
Mm-hmm.
everything that's wrong with me and think about finding like the color purple in a mix of words or letters
Mm-hmm.
actually really helped just let me sleep, which I
Yeah.
didn't think was possible.
So that same highway we talked about, that Vegas highway, the vagal nerve, What sensation you think goes down that? You think anything related to sleep also might happen on that?
Yes, and that was another thing you talked about in the book,
Mm-hmm.
sleep.
Right. So what's really cool is if you can free up that highway, all the signals that you need will run through there. So when people get really nervous or anxious or have panic, when it hits their digestive tract, signals like hunger or thirst start to disappear, right? Really strong ones that you notice that things like arousal, sexually or otherwise, they almost immediately disappear. So everything gets blocked out if you're anxious because again, it's like a crash. It's like a blue shell for Mario just going off and destroying whatever's going on in the race, no matter what, like I say in the book. But if you can clear it out, you get all these other signals. And one of the signals you need to go to sleep is your sleep drive. And you'll feel it really strongly if you're sleep deprived 2, 3 hours, right? And so I'm glad that rotating it kind of clears that highway because once that happens, how easy is it to feel things like being sleepy or calm or heavy, the things you want to feel to go to sleep?
So easy, and it's so calming. It
Right,
genuinely is because I didn't realize. I mean, I'm always talking, well, all always talking to ourselves. We hear ourselves in our heads 24/7. A lot of the
right,
messages we're getting are coming from our own brains.
right.
And I didn't realize how loud those voices really were until I took out the word search book for the first time and started doing it before bed and realizing how calm my brain was able to get that I was yawning, that I was
Mm-hmm.
genuinely feeling tired and I wasn't trying to force myself to go to bed, wasn't trying to force those thoughts off, but I was genuinely getting tired and
Right.
actually able to go to sleep. Like my whole sleep practice changed.
One of the biggest things I do other than panic is sleep. So I would happy to come back at another point. We could talk about sleep, but sleep is such an integral part of that same network. And when you unlock that road, a lot of things can travel down it. And some of those things are really necessary, like that heavy, tired, calming weight you get when you start to fall asleep.
Yeah, I really underestimated the power of sleep until I will say I was not sleeping well for a while, and 2 nights ago was the first time that I actually slept through a night from like
Wow.
dark to sunrise. It was
It's got to feel
absolutely
great. Yeah.
amazing. This energy I have today did not here 3 days ago at all.
I get it.
And it really impacts my ability to how much anxiety and the intensity, but also my ability to recognize and cope with it.
Right. It's amazing. Like how good does it feel to know you can pick up a word search from the supermarket aisle and it'll help you fall asleep and stop your panic. That's crazy, but it's effective. You look at the research and you understand it, but most people don't have access to that.
And that's why conversations like this, books like yours, are so important because all it takes is the first step is knowing what you're experiencing and then what you can do. And it
Right.
really helps just move forward. Another thing, so on the note of like the word searches, crosswords, Tetris, was the doodle it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me realize why the encouragement cards, like coloring them, helps me.
What's it
Is
help you with? What'd you realize?
I realized that I wasn't so much in my thoughts and I was kind of forcing my thoughts to change because I was so focused on like what colors I was using
Mm-hmm.
and what colors are going to look good together and how I'm going to form out the picture and make it look pretty. My
Mm-hmm.
thoughts went from I hate myself to, ooh, do pink and teal look cute together?
Right. So when you pick a part of your brain that does a task like design, anything visual, it's going to short out a lot of the verbal stuff. Even looking for words, how to spell them, right? That's what you're doing in a word search and sorting through all the other letters and symbols in there. We underestimate how much brain power it takes. But if you can keep doing that, it'll short out a lot of the different signals that are coming from the part of your brain, the limbic system, that's basically sending all these signals up to the front part of your brain that does all the talking, all these different regions to come up with really annoying narratives like, you're horrible, or what the hell are you doing, or anything mean that you might encounter. Because yeah, that's a really crappy part of having depression.
It is. And it's
Yeah.
so hard when you don't know how to get out of your own head. You don't know how
Right.
to you don't know where the thoughts are coming from. You don't know how to control them. You don't know how to make them stop. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels like forever. And with depression, it can be weeks and months. One thing
Right.
that I learned in your book is that panic comes in waves.
Right.
So it feels permanent. It is like temporary, but those, however long it is lasting, feels like it's never going to get better. And if we can identify that, one, it's going to end and we are going to get through this, super important. But also, there's things we can do when it's first starting, when we're recognizing it to help lower the intensity. And even while it's happening, just help us breathe through it.
Right. And that's where things like cold showers and ice exposure and really invigorating, jolting sensations come in because when you jolt your system that way, you basically give an option for your that same break, the vagal break in your heart to engage to slow things down. That's automatically what we're evolved to do. Your brain is not sophisticated enough to know that if you're squeezing an ice cube or if you're in a cold shower, that you're not going to freeze to death. And so it assumes you're going to freeze to death. So it sends all these signals through your body to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow down. We got to conserve energy, or we're gonna die sooner. And we don't want to freeze to death before another human finds us, because that's going to be our main survival strategy." And so internally, everything slows down because it has to. There's so many things that are part of our parasympathetic nervous system, the things we're not conscious of, that if we knew how to engage more, which is what the book's all about, you could really stop parts of a panic experience so it doesn't have to go on for hours. I remember when I was a kid, I would get panic and it sucked because it felt like it was never going to end. And one of the things I feel so lucky for is that I got connected to therapy earlier in my life, or else I would have been screwed and not known what anything was happening. But a lot of people I realize don't. So this book's kind of for them, for a lot of folks. If this is a gateway, if this is all you get, then I hope it's helpful. I hope it's a gateway to seeing that things like therapy, things like DBT, a lot of the stuff in this book, they're not so strange. They're pretty easy. They're not necessarily the weirdest. They're really cool ways to understand them as little hacks in your brain. That if you can learn to do it, yeah.
And I think it makes the idea of therapy and treatment less scary because
Right.
a lot of times it feels, for me, before I access therapy, I was like, someone's just gonna sit there and tell me what's wrong with me. And I was like, I don't want to hear that. I feel like I know what's wrong with me.
Right.
I don't want someone to tell me. It's gonna stress me out. And my mom thought, oh, they're just gonna tell you that I'm the problem.
Yep.
So, and we never thought about how there's actual takeaways from therapy. And it's not just
I know. Nobody knows about positive psych or skills-based therapies as much, even though they're emerging DBT and all these other skills-based programs that don't assume you have to be anything other than a person looking for skills, which is what most people are. That's really the way I try to approach most of my therapy. I work with a lot of men, and men definitely have a lot of the stigma that you're talking about, especially thinking there's something being weak when you can't get through something like this, as opposed to the reality that it's probably that you're missing skills that nobody has a day in school. Do you remember the day in school on panic? Because I don't remember that day in school. I don't think there was that day in school that taught us about how panic attacks worked or what was going to help you with that. So I don't think it's really fair to hold a lot of people accountable to know how to do that stuff when they never learned how. And that's what therapy can be, learning how.
yeah, exactly. So I finally entered practicum and
Hey,
yes, I've seen my first two clients and
congrats.
thank you. And my big thing going in was I was so afraid of not getting anything out of therapy that I didn't want to go. And when I didn't leave with something, it felt like, okay, what did I do here? I could be validated from my friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
So my one thing is you're gonna walk away with something. Maybe it's an affirmation you can tell yourself based on all the negative things you were telling yourself the week before, or something you're looking forward to doing this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Just some small takeaway. And I had someone come in and say, I don't know why I'm here. What are you gonna do? At the end, I can't wait to try this and see you next week and tell you about it. So I think that finding just the right therapist who can offer you the right tools, maybe what you really need in this moment is just someone to listen and validate. And that is amazing. And having a therapist that can do that for you is amazing. Maybe you need one who's more action oriented and focused on tools like a CBT, DBT. Finding what works for you and who works for you is a very important piece because we're all different. And I think that's
Yes.
something I didn't realize was what works for my friends may not work for me. What works for me may not work for them. And that doesn't mean any of us are broken, for different people with different needs, and that's okay.
Right. That's why did we come up with all these different therapies if we were all the same people? We have all these different things because we have different folks with different identities and different struggles. And all that's important in deciding what kind of treatment you're going to do with somebody. But what's really great is this book is a great addendum. I've heard all this stuff from therapists online who do all different kinds of modalities already on Goodreads and on Amazon, writing about my book, saying things that I couldn't even imagine they were going to do. Like they give this book to their patients as things they can take home. They're using it as a resource to explain symptoms, like you're talking about, because people didn't really realize how many of these things are anxiety symptoms that they thought might be like GI symptoms or digestive things when they're in actuality like a huge anxious wave of nausea that somebody's getting.
Yes.
So it's really huge. I think a lot of folks could use this book as a part of their treatment, even if it's not something they're using directly. If their patients are looking for something outside a session, it certainly seems useful. Or if they're trying to understand and define what panic is from a senses point of view, from what it feels like in your body, I think this book can help.
I know this book can help. And what I love and appreciate so much about it is, again, how simple it makes it because you explain what the big words mean.
Yeah.
And that's really cool because it's not taking away the academia of it, it's not taking away the science. It's just making it that you can understand it. So then maybe you do see a resource later on that has all the big words. You know what they mean, and you're not just looking at it like, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. This is not going to work for me. I'm going to just not try anything. So
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I
really
was I
amazing.
was very fortunate to be trained by amazingly generous women, a lot of doctors that taught me it, the smartest you could ever be is making things as simple as possible, that a fifth or sixth grader could understand them. If you can't do that, then you don't really understand the concept. And if you don't understand the concept, you can't really teach it to other people. And so I carry that with me. It's one of the things I feel the most grateful for in my education is knowing I always really have to translate things or else it's really useless.
Yeah, that is so true. When talking about, I've had a few friends since I got this book who've reached out to me about, like, what do I do? I'm having really bad anxiety, or I think I'm
Mhm.
having a panic attack. What do I do? Fix it for me. And I'm like, can't fix it for you, but I'm going to send you some exercises. Tell me which ones you think might work for you, or try them. Let me know what works for you because I'm
Right?
really interested in finding what works for you, but knowing that what worked for me and what worked for you might be very different. I had friends who really enjoyed the doodle it out, but did not
Mhm.
enjoy the calm anchor playlist. They're like, I can't figure out music right now.
Mhm.
Or like nothing makes me feel calm. But doodling it out made them focus on colors and
Mhm.
trying to make something pretty that they can give to somebody. So it was really different for each of us how it worked. And I thought that was really fascinating because the book isn't just a one size fits all. It gives you different things that may work for you, that may work for someone else, and you can try all of it. It's not just like you go on TikTok and someone posts, this is what I did to cure my anxiety. And then you
Mhm.
try it. You don't feel anxious, not work. You're like, something is wrong with me. This
Right.
book is a list of tools that you can try, and you even explain some of the symptoms that this may help for. For example, like you were talking about the cold shower that really helps slow everything down. So if
Yep.
you're noticing your heart racing really fast, that can be a really, really great tool. But if you're noticing more nausea, something else can be a really great tool. So I loved how you not only broke it down to different options of exercises, but how they may work for different physical symptoms because it just, you took a lot of the guesswork out of it and made it that it's something you can genuinely use in that moment or use the practice for that moment.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's be great to have a book that's basically full of the best, most scientifically accurate TikTok exercises, and so that's what I did. I made that book, and that's what you got here. You got your little survival guide of the things that you may or may not find on TikTok, but definitely are evidence-based and research-based, spelled out right here for you, right down to the sensation to make it pretty easy. I mean, people aren't going to read it cover to cover. That's never what I wanted them to do. Like you're saying, I'd like them to use it as a resource manual, the same way you use your car's manual when you're looking to see, like, why is that light on? Why is that light not going off? What does that mean? Well, I think people underestimate how much of their body can be understood the same way. And that if we approach it that way, it doesn't have to feel as personal or as stigmatizing or as lonely or as helpless. And that would be the goal. I'd like everybody to have that experience, to feel powerful against panic.
You definitely have reached that goal with this book. I'm really curious what your favorite exercise is, though.
My favorite exercise, well, I do leaves on a stream pretty much every day. And that's a big part of ACT and DBT treatments that's in the book when we talk about cognitive diffusion, because I find the better I get at letting go of those annoying narrative threads, the easier it becomes to pivot and do anything else when I'm having those moments where I can't get out of my own head. The ones we've been talking about a bit today. And so Leaves on a Stream really allows me to constantly build this muscle for letting go of thoughts, letting them drift away. And it just makes me feel really, really calm when I'm having a hard time, because almost always I'm having a huge string of thoughts and images and things I don't want to have happening in my head that it's lovely to notice can drift down the river like so many leaves and just disappear into the horizon.
It's a really great visualization technique to actually get to kind of see those thoughts coming out of your head,
Mm-hmm.
the river, and going away. Because I think something that I hear a lot is just let it go, just let it go. And I'm like, I don't know how if I did.
Right.
Don't you think I would have?
Right.
But this is a great example of a way that you can work on letting it go by watching it drift away. I think this book is absolutely incredible. Can you tell us all how we can purchase it?
How you can purchase it? Well, you got a lot of different options. You can go on Audible, because there's an audio version of it if you're into listening to books. And it's lovely. It's not me, but it's a lovely gentleman with a delightful voice named Lyle Baker. And you can also go on Amazon or any major bookseller and find it. You can get it from my publisher, New Harbinger. I think they'd like you to get it from their site, newharbinger.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I really, really, again, appreciate this book. I have gone through so many different resources, genuinely so many different resources, and I found a lot of them helpful. I really did. But this book really helped me understand more and find tools that could work for me and for my friends. So it wasn't just, here's some exercises I can try. It wasn't just, here's the information I can understand it. It brought all of it together, and it's become my survival guide and a survival guide for a lot of my friends with me. Like when that check engine light comes on, I call my dad. When the check engine light comes on in my friends, they call me, and I send them exercises from this. So I genuinely appreciate it, and I really recommend anyone listening to check out this book, because
Thank you so much.
it really, really helped me.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation, and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.